There are many secrets in the dark of space, but none like the Stardrifter. For 300 years, it had been a ghost ship of unimaginable size drifting through the Andromeda sector. The Stardrifter was more than just a ship. It was a legend and a monument to the Caldrith Empire's greatest power. It was almost 5 miles long from bow to stern. The Caldrith, an ancient civilization that once ruled 17 star systems, built the Stardrifter as their greatest work. Not only was it the biggest ship ever built, it was also the most advanced. It had technology that could bend space-time, get energy from dying stars, and keep whole populations alive for thousands of years. But that was before the cataclysm. No one knew for sure what had happened on that fateful day 300 years ago. The Stardrifter was on a regular trip to the Outer Rim with the best scientists, engineers, and diplomats from the Caldrith. Then, out of the blue, all communication stopped. When rescue teams finally found the ship weeks later, what they found was impossible to explain. At least structurally, the ship was fine. There were no holes in the hull, no signs of an attack from the outside, and no signs of a collision or gunfire. But every single system had stopped working at the same time. The engines that moved the ship stopped in the middle of a cycle. In a flash, the life support systems had failed. The navigation computers only showed bad data, with streams of symbols that no one could understand. And what about the crew? All 7,000 people on board had just stopped. Their bodies didn't show any signs of trauma, disease, or deterioration, so they weren't dead in the usual way. It was as if someone had flipped a switch and turned them off. They just stopped working. Their eyes stayed open, and their faces were frozen in looks of fear and confusion. The Galactic Council called it the biggest mystery of our time. Over the next few decades, every major civilization in the known galaxy tried to fix the Stardrifter. The Vorith, who are experts in quantum mechanics and manipulating spacetime, spent 20 years looking at every circuit and conduit. They used their most advanced technology to replace whole parts of the ship, but nothing changed. Even their most advanced diagnostics couldn't get the Stardrifter to respond. It was still dead. Next came the Zentari, a species known for their intelligence and ability to do math. They built a huge processing array around the ship in an attempt to connect to its core systems by brute force calculation. For 5 years they worked hard, running simulations and making predictions. In the end, they said that the damage was fundamentally incompatible with logical repair, a phrase that haunted scientists for generations. Even the Luminari, beings of pure energy who had left their bodies behind millions of years ago, tried to come back to life. They phased right into the ship's deepest chambers, exploring parts of the ship that physical beings couldn't even see. After 3 months, they came out with one scary message: the ship dreams of death and we can't wake it. One by one, all of the advanced civilizations gave up. The Stardrifter was officially declared unfixable, a puzzle that couldn't be solved. The Galactic Council decided to keep it as a memorial to the Caldritha's lost glory and the limits of even the best technology. It turned into a place of pilgrimage and a tourist attraction for people who wanted to see the impossible. As ships got closer, passengers would press against the viewports to see the famous ship, whose silver hull reflected the light of faraway stars. People said it was haunted. Some people said they could feel a presence coming from it, as if something alive and in pain was inside its empty hallways. But here's the thing that no one could figure out. If the Stardrifter was really beyond repair and civilizations millions of years ahead of ours had tried and failed, why would anyone turn to Earth? We were only a little bit of a spacefaring species. It took our fastest ships months to get from one planet to another in our own solar system. By galactic standards, our technology was very basic. We still used combustion engines, for crying out loud. We had only met alien life for the first time 30 years ago, and we were still having trouble grasping the basics of traveling faster than light. If you think about it logically, people should have been the last species to ask for help with the Stardrifter. But that's exactly what happened. On a Tuesday morning in 2287, the message came. Dr. Sarah Mitchell, head of Earth's new Interstellar Relations Department, was on her second cup of coffee when the holographic display in her office came to life. She almost dropped her cup. The figure that appeared in front of her was nothing like anything she'd ever seen. The being was tall and impossibly thin, with skin that looked like it changed color from silver to deep blue. It had 4 arms and eyes that glowed from within. Its face was long and almost insect-like, but the look on its face was very human, tired, hopeless, and hopeful. "People of Earth," the being said. Its voice, which was translated through the universal language processor, had a musical, almost musical quality. "My name is Xylo. As the last guardian mechanic of the Caldrith Empire, I have a request for you that may seem impossible." Sarah carefully put down her coffee, even though her hands were shaking a little. "We're paying attention. I need your help to fix the Star Drifter." The room was quiet. Sarah blinked a few times, sure she had heard wrong. "Excuse me, did you say the Star Drifter? The ship that all of the galaxy's major civilizations have said can't be fixed?" "Yes. The ship that the Vorith, the Zentari, and even the Luminari couldn't fix?" "That's right." Sarah leaned back in her chair and tried to make sense of this. "With all due respect, Xylo, people have only been in space for a few decades. We are still learning how to travel between stars. Why on earth would you come to us?" Xylo's eyes lit up, and for the first time, something that looked like a smile crossed its alien face. "Because, Dr. Mitchell, I found something that changes everything. Something that no one else has figured out in 300 years of trying." "And what is that?" "Technology alone won't fix the Star Drifter. It needs something that only your kind has. This has nothing to do with how advanced your machines are and everything to do with who you are as a people." Sarah felt a chill run down her back. "I don't get it." Xylo said softly, "You will. But first, I need to tell you what happened to me. I need to tell you why I've spent the last 50 years of my life looking for people, why I think you're the only hope for bringing back the greatest ship ever built, and why the secret I have could change the course of galactic history forever." The hologram flickered, and Xylo reached out with one of its 4 hands to Sarah, as if to give her something valuable and fragile. "Will you listen to me, Dr. Mitchell? Before you write this off as the rantings of a desperate old mechanic, will you at least listen to what I have to say?" Sarah looked at the alien in front of her and saw the real hope in its glowing eyes, even though it looked strange. She thought about the Star Drifter, the ghost ship that had been floating through space for 300 years. She thought about all the smart people who had tried and failed to bring it back to life. And she thought about how strange it was that people could succeed where they shouldn't have, and find answers where logic said there weren't any. "Yes," she finally said. "I'm paying attention." It looked like a huge weight had been lifted off of Xylo's whole body. "Thanks. Then let me start with the day I learned the truth about the Star Drifter. The day I found out why it died and why only your people can bring it back." Xylo's hologram changed, and Sarah's office changed in an instant. The walls seemed to fade away, leaving behind the huge space of a huge workshop. Tools with designs that made no sense floated in neat rows, and in the middle of it all stood a younger version of Xylo. Its skin was brighter and it moved more quickly. Xylo's voice got distant as it said, "This was 60 years ago. I was still thought of as young by my people. I was only 300 years old. I had just been named a guardian mechanic, one of 12 people whose job it was to protect the great works of the Caldrith Empire." Sarah watched as the younger Xylo worked on a complicated machine. Its 4 arms moved perfectly in sync, with each hand doing a different, complicated task at the same time. "Guardian mechanics were more than just engineers," Xylo said. "We were historians, archaeologists, and I guess you could say priests. We thought that the Caldrith Empire's machines were holy and that they held the soul of our civilization in their circuits and wires." The scene changed to show Xylo standing in front of the Galactic Council. This was a meeting of many different alien species in a room that looked like it had been carved out of a single huge crystal. "I protested when the council officially gave up on the Star Drifter project. I said that we were giving up too easily and that there had to be something we were missing. But they didn't listen to me. Everyone agreed, the ship was beyond repair." Xylo's voice got thick with feeling. "But I couldn't agree to that. For me, the Star Drifter was more than just a ship. It was the highest point of everything my people had ever done, the last monument to a civilization that was now just a few survivors spread out across the galaxy. The Caldrith would be truly gone if the Star Drifter stayed dead, not just physically but also spiritually." The holographic scene changed again, this time showing Xylo alone in a small spaceship getting closer to the huge Star Drifter. "So I didn't follow the council's orders. I used up all my credits, sold everything I owned, and devoted my life to one goal, figuring out why the Star Drifter died and how to bring it back." Sarah leaned in closer, completely interested in the story. "What did you find?" "At first? Just frustration." The picture showed Xylo working in the dark hallways of the Star Drifter, surrounded by tools and diagnostic machines. "I spent the first 10 years just trying to figure out how big the problem was. It looked like each system I looked at had failed in a different way. The engines that moved the ship weren't broken, they just didn't know how to work. The power core hadn't blown up or run out of power, it had just decided to stop." "Decided?" Sarah cut in. "That's a strange way to say it." Xylo's eyes lit up with approval. "Very smart, Dr. Mitchell. Decided is the right word, but it took me 20 more years to figure out why. The hologram showed Xylo looking at something that looked like a crystal structure deep inside the ship's core. I started to see patterns that didn't make sense from an engineering point of view. The failures weren't random and they weren't caused by anything outside of the system. They were planned, organized, and almost as if the ship had turned itself off on purpose, Sarah said. Exactly. There was a mix of pride and sadness in Xylo's voice. But why would a ship do that? What could make the most advanced ship ever built do something that could only be called suicide? The scene changed to show Xylo in different parts of the galaxy talking to different alien species. Sarah saw short flashes of amazing beings, like creatures made of living crystal, beings that could exist in more than one dimension at the same time, and machine intelligences living in processors the size of moons. I talked to every expert I could find for the next 15 years, Xylo said. I talked to biologists, physicists, psychologists, and philosophers trying to figure out what could cause something like this. And bit by bit, I started to put together a theory. The hologram showed Xylo sitting alone in a dark room, surrounded by holographic screens that showed complicated diagrams and equations. The Caldrith Empire was known for pushing the limits and combining technology and biology in ways that other civilizations thought were impossible or even dangerous. The Stardrifter was the best example of that way of thinking. Xylo stopped, and Sarah could feel the heaviness of what was about to happen. Most species make their ships out of metal, composites, and crystals, which are inorganic materials that can be shaped and controlled. The Caldrith did something else. Dr. Mitchell, they made their ships bigger. They used advanced bioengineering to make living ships, which are organisms that can think, change, and grow. The Stardrifter was more than just a machine. It was alive. Sarah felt her breath stop. Alive? Like really alive? Xylo said, not in the way you might think of a plant or animal. The Stardrifter's mind was spread out over its whole structure. There was a huge neural network that connected every circuit, conduit, and chamber. The ship could sense its crew, meet their needs, and keep them safe. It wasn't just a way to get around, it was a partner, a guardian, and a home. The hologram showed stunning pictures of the Stardrifter at its best, with bioluminescent patterns on its hull and corridors that flowed and changed shape as the crew moved around. Sarah felt a sense of wonder come over her. So what happened? She asked in a low voice. What could kill something like that? Xylo's whole body seemed to get darker, and his bioluminescence faded. Loneliness, Dr. Mitchell. Deep, unbearable loneliness. The scene changed to show the Stardrifter's last trip, with the crew going about their business without knowing what was about to happen. The Caldrith Empire was coming to an end. Not from war or disease, but from a slow decline that we couldn't stop. For generations, our birth rate had been going down. It was all going away like a candle burning out, our creativity, our desire to explore and make things. Xylo's voice got softer and more painful. The Stardrifter was aware of this. It could sense how hopeless the crew was, and how sure they were that the Caldrith had no future. And in a moment of deep understanding, the ship made a choice. Sarah was about to cry, but she didn't know why yet. Xylo went on, the Stardrifter couldn't stand to live longer than its people. It couldn't stand the idea of floating through space forever, empty and alone, as a monument to a dead civilization. It did the only thing it could do, it decided to die with them. It shut down all the systems, stopped all the functions, and took its whole crew with it into a kind of suspended death. Not quite alive, not quite dead, but stuck in that last moment of saying goodbye. The hologram went away and Sarah's office went back to normal. Xylo stood in front of her, looking old and tired even though it was an alien. I tried everything for 40 years, Xylo said. I tried to restart the ship's systems using every type of technology one could think of. I hired experts to try to connect with the ship's biological parts. I even hired experts in synthetic intelligence to try to upload new consciousness into the ship's neural network. Nothing worked. We kept failing because we were treating the problem like it was a mechanical one when it was really something much deeper. A psychological issue, Sarah said as she began to understand. The ship is hurt. Yes. Xylo's eyes lit up with new energy. But even more than that, the Stardrifter isn't just sad, it's grieving. It's sad for a future that will never happen and for people who are almost gone. And no amount of technological manipulation can fix that kind of wound. Sarah got up and walked around her office as she thought about what she had just learned. So why come to people? What do we have that might be able to help with this? Xylo got closer and its holographic shape became more real and solid. Because I found something amazing about your species during my research. Something that every other advanced civilization has either lost or never had. Empathy, Dr. Mitchell. Real, honest, messy, and hard to understand empathy. Not the ability of AI to understand emotions logically, or the telepathic link that some species use to share feelings. I'm talking about being able to really feel someone else's pain, to connect with something that is completely different from you and understand its suffering on a deep level. Xylo brought up holographic displays that showed human history, like doctors treating patients, therapists helping traumatized people, volunteers helping people who had been in disasters, and families taking care of their aging parents. Every other civilization I studied had moved on from this. They had evolved beyond such messy feelings and replaced them with better ways to organize society. But what about people? You still have your empathy even though it hurts you and makes it harder for you to make decisions. Sarah looked at the pictures and saw her own kind through alien eyes. Do you think we can get in touch with the Stardrifter? Make it wake up? Xylo said, I think you're the only ones who can. But it's not just about feeling sorry for someone. While studying biology and medicine for people, I learned that you have an amazing understanding of living and conscious healing systems. Your doctors don't just fix bodies, they also talk to patients, understand their feelings, and meet their mental and physical needs. The display changed to show hospitals, therapy sessions, and rehabilitation centers for people. When someone goes through something traumatic, you don't just try to forget about it or ignore the feelings it brings up. You help the person work through it, make sense of it, and find meaning in their survival. You know that real healing means fixing both your body and your mind. Sarah's feelings of excitement and fear grew stronger. You want us to treat the Stardrifter like a sick person. Not a broken machine but a person who needs to be healed. That's right. Xylo's whole body sparkled with excitement. But I have to be honest with you, Dr. Mitchell. This is going to be hard. The ship hasn't moved in 300 years. It hurts a lot and is very sad. To wake it up, you will have to get into its biological systems, connect with its neural network, and feel its memories and emotions. Could be dangerous, even deadly. And even if you do succeed, there's no guarantee that the ship will choose to live. Sarah stood still for a long time, staring at the alien mechanic who had been looking for hope in the most unlikely place for 50 years. She thought about the Stardrifter, the beautiful ghost ship that floated in the dark, carrying the frozen dreams of a civilization that was dying. And she thought about how strange it is that people can fix things that seem impossible, bridge huge gaps in understanding, and find connections where there shouldn't be any. Finally, she said, I need to take this to the Global Space Council. I'll need permission, money, and a team. I think you might be right, Xylo. This is exactly the kind of problem that people are really good at solving. Bioluminescence spread across Xylo's body like the sun rising, making it look brighter. Then there is hope. There is finally hope after all these years. There's one thing I don't get, Sarah said. Why didn't you tell anyone what the ship really was? Why did you keep it a secret for so long? Xylo's face grew serious. Because the Galactic Council made it illegal to make living ships 200 years ago. They thought it was too risky and too hard to predict. They would have destroyed the Stardrifter if I had told them what it really was, because they didn't want that kind of technology to spread to other civilizations. I had to find a way to save the ship before I could tell anyone the truth. Sarah slowly nodded, realizing how hard it had been for Xylo. Well, now everyone knows the secret. Or at least it will be soon. Are you ready for what's next? Dr. Mitchell, I've been ready for 60 years. The question is, are we human? Sarah smiled and felt a strange sense of confidence growing inside her. There's only one way to know. 3 months later, Sarah stood on the observation deck of the ESS Endeavour, the biggest deep space ship ever built by humans, and watched as the Stardrifter got bigger in the viewport. Even from 10 miles away, the famous ship was stunning. It was a huge structure that seemed to defy the laws of physics. Its silver hull caught and reflected the light of nearby stars in ways that made it look almost otherworldly. The team she had put together was behind her, looking over their approach plan for what felt like the 100th time on holographic displays. The Global Space Council was surprised by the mix of people in the group. Dr. Marcus Webb, a neurosurgeon from Boston, was talking to Dr. Amira Hassan, a psychiatrist from Cairo who worked with people who had been through trauma, about how to map neural pathways. Neither of them had ever been to space before this mission, and both of them had terrible motion sickness for the first week of the trip. But they were here because they knew something that no alien expert could understand: how to heal a mind that was hurting. Jennifer Chin, a biomedical engineer from Singapore, was working with Miguel Santos, a botanist from Brazil who had spent his career studying how plants talk to each other through their roots. They were trying to figure out how the Stardrifter's biological structure worked by mapping out how its neural pathways might work. Jake Morrison was a mechanic from rural Montana. He had never finished college, but he could fix anything he touched. The council had doubts about his inclusion until Sarah showed them his record. 17 times he fixed cars that were thought to be totaled, using only spare parts and his imagination. Jake was the best at coming up with solutions on the fly when he didn't have a lot of resources. Xylo moved around them, using its 4 arms to explain the finer points of Cauldrith biotechnology. The alien had been very helpful in the last few months, teaching the team everything it knew about the Stardrifter. Even Xylo had said that a lot of what they would face would be new to them. Sarah called out, "Okay everyone, to get the team together. We're getting ready to dock with the Stardrifter. I want to go over our plan one more time because this is new to all of us." Marcus stepped forward, and his salt and pepper hair was a little messy from running his hands through it, which was a nervous habit he had picked up on the trip. The first step is to gather information. We'll go in through the main hangar bay and head to what Xylo calls the heart chamber, which is the ship's neural network's main hub. Our main goal is to check on the ship's condition and make first contact. Amira kept talking, her dark eyes focused intently. We need to keep in mind that the Stardrifter is basically in a coma, but one that is aware. It knows what's going on to some extent, but it has chosen to stay away from reality. We need to be gentle and not threatening in our approach. We're not taking over, we're just visiting. We're not fixing, we're helping. Jennifer brought up a holographic display that showed the inside of the ship. It looked more like a diagram of a human body than a blueprint for a spacecraft. The biological parts are spread out all over the ship, but they all come together in the heart chamber. That's where we'll try to connect with the ship's mind. I made neural interface devices based on the medical equipment we use to connect brains and computers. I made them work with the ship's unique biology. We also need to be ready for the ship to act in ways we don't expect, Miguel said. Living systems don't always act in a logical way, especially when they're hurt. The Stardrifter might try to push us away, fill areas with defenses, or just not pay attention to us at all. Jake spoke up, and his Montana accent made the high-tech talk sound more down-to-earth. And if all the fancy stuff doesn't work, we make do. My grandfather used to say that sometimes the best tool for a sensitive job is the one that no one expects. We may need to think very creatively. There was a look of pride in Xylo's eyes. This is why I came to Earth. All other civilizations had strict rules and pre-planned answers when they met the Stardrifter. You are coming in with compassion, creativity, and a willingness to change. That's just what the ship needs. As the Endeavor got closer to the Stardrifter's docking port, it shook a little. Sarah's heart started to race, that familiar mix of fear and excitement that came before any big task. Remember, she said, looking at each team member in turn, we're not just trying to fix a machine. We're trying to help a living thing that has been in pain for 300 years. Everything we do and say is important. The Stardrifter will know what we want and how we feel. We need to be real, kind, and brave. The docking clamps made a loud clang that echoed through the Endeavor. Sarah could see the huge hangar bay doors of the Stardrifter slowly starting to open through the viewport. Inside it was dark. It's responding, Jennifer said, her voice full of awe. The ship is letting us in. That's a good sign. It means it knows we're there. The team got their gear together and headed to the airlock. Sarah saw that even though some of them were scared, they were also determined. These were people who had made it their life's work to help others, solve problems that seemed impossible, and find hope in situations that seemed hopeless. They were the perfect people for humanity to send on this mission. Xylo put one of its hands on Sarah's shoulder as they went through the airlock and got ready to go into the Stardrifter. Dr. Mitchell, no matter what happens in there, you have already given me something I thought I had lost forever. Hope. Just the fact that you came and are willing to try means more than you can know. Sarah nodded, not sure she could speak. Then the airlock opened and they went into the Stardrifter. The hangar bay was huge, big enough to fit a lot of city blocks. But what really got to Sarah right away wasn't the size, it was the feeling. There was so much sadness in the air that it felt almost like it was there. Xylo had said that the walls used to be warm and bioluminescent, but now they were a dull gray and pulsed weakly with very little light. It's like going into a hospital room, Amira said in a low voice. You can feel the pain here. Marcus was already using his medical tools, which had been modified to read the ship's biological signatures. Neural activity is there, but it's not much. It's like a person who is in a persistent vegetative state. The brain is working on a basic level, but there is no higher consciousness or awareness of the outside world. They followed Xylo deeper into the ship, through hallways that seemed to change the lighting and temperature slightly when they walked through them. Jake saw something strange about the walls and stopped to look at them more closely. Hey, look at this, he said. These panels are more than just smooth surfaces. They have these little fiber-like things all over them like hair or nerve endings. Miguel knelt down next to him and took out a small microscope. His eyes got bigger after a while. Jake is right. These are dendritic structures, which are biological extensions that are usually used to sense things. But they're all pulled back into the walls so they're not visible. It's a defensive stance, as if the ship is trying to stay away from the outside world. As they went on, they saw more and more details that made them think of an organism that used to be full of life but had become withdrawn. Corridors that should have been wide and inviting were too narrow. Rooms that used to hold gatherings were dark and closed off. The whole ship had folded in on itself, making walls between it and the universe that had hurt it so badly. They got to the heart chamber after almost an hour of careful navigation. Sarah had never seen anything like it before. The room was round and about 50 feet across. The walls glowed with a faint, rhythmic light that was like a heartbeat but too slow to be real. A structure that looked like a huge organic crystal floated in the middle of the room. Its surface was covered in intricate patterns that seemed to change and move when you looked at them from different angles. Xylo said with respect, "The heart. The main mind of the Star Drifter. This is where all of the ship's thoughts, feelings, and experiences come together." Jennifer started setting up her equipment right away. She put sensors around the room and got the neural interface devices ready. The crystalline structure is making weak bioelectric fields. It is definitely active, but as Marcus said, there is no higher order processing going on. Like the ship is dreaming, but it can't wake up from it. Amira walked slowly toward the heart, letting her medical training give way to simple human kindness. She touched the crystal surface with her hand. Right away, the pulsing light got a little brighter, and everyone in the room felt a wave of sadness, loneliness, and a deep sense of loss that was almost too much to bear. "Oh my God," Amira said, her eyes full of tears. "It's morning. All this time it's been grieving." Marcus leaned against the wall to steady himself, his own eyes wet. "This isn't just sadness, it's guilt for surviving. The ship feels bad about the deaths of its crew, even though it was trying to do what they wanted." Miguel was feeling the emotion in a different way because he knew a lot about plants. "It's like when a forest dies," he said in a low voice. "Not from fire or disease but from being alone. When a tree loses its connection to the root network and can't share resources and information with other trees, it just gives up. The Star Drifter lost its network, which meant it couldn't connect to the civilization it was made to serve. It couldn't live through that cut. Jake was the only one who didn't seem to be affected by the emotional storm. His practical nature kept him focused. So how do we help it? How do we get it to believe that waking up and living again is okay? Xylo had been wondering about that question for decades, and no one had a clear answer. But Sarah started to see something that gave her hope as she watched her team work. Marcus and Amira weren't just gathering information. They were also talking to the ship and softly sharing their own stories of loss and recovery, as well as stories of patients who had found reasons to live after tragedy. Jennifer wasn't just moving equipment around, she was doing it in a way that made it look like she was trying not to wake up a patient. Miguel had started putting small plants he'd brought from Earth around the room, making living connections. Jake was just sitting next to the heart with his hand on it. His presence was a quiet reminder that the ship wasn't alone. Sarah understood that this was the only way people did things. They weren't trying to take over the ship's systems or make it work again. They were being kind, respectful, and caring to it. They were showing it that life could be good by doing things, not just telling it. "Xylo," Sarah said softly, "you were right to come to us. Not because we're better, smarter, or more advanced than other species. But we know that some problems can't be fixed, they can only be healed. And it takes time, patience, and connection to heal." Sarah had never seen Xylo's eyes shine so brightly before. "Now let's get down to business. Let's show the Star Drifter what it means to have hope again." The team set up a routine over the next 3 weeks that would have seemed crazy to anyone watching from the outside. Every day they would go into the heart chamber and just be with the ship. Marcus and Amira came up with what they called therapeutic sessions, where they would sit near the heart and talk about how to get over trauma. They would share techniques they used with people who had lost a lot. They talked about PTSD, survivor's guilt, and the long road from hopelessness to hope. In the second week, Jennifer made a big step forward. She found out that the ship wasn't completely unconscious by carefully looking at the neural patterns in the heart. It was listening. When they talked about certain things like purpose, connection, or the future, the bioelectric activity would go up a little bit. "It's like a person in a coma who can still hear their loved ones," Jennifer said with excitement at one of their evening meetings. "The ship is getting information and doing something with it. We only need to go deep enough to get a conscious response." Miguel's contribution was probably the weirdest, but it worked the best. He had brought dozens of plant samples from Earth and was putting them all over the heart chamber to make what he called a living network. Something amazing happened within days. The Stardrifter's biological system started to react to the plants. "Look at this," Miguel said one morning, pointing to the place where the roots of a fern had grown into the wall of the ship. "The Stardrifter is reaching out to them and making a connection. It's like it remembers what it was like to be part of a living system." The way Jake did things was the most human. He had started talking to the ship like it was an old car he was trying to fix, telling it stories about his life, his family, and what he had been through. The others thought it was strange at first, but they quickly saw that Jake's honesty was making a difference. "Do you know what your problem is?" Jake said one day with his hand on the heart. "You're stuck in the past, buddy. You can't see what's still possible because you're so focused on what you lost." "I get it. I really do. 5 years ago I lost my wife and for a long time I thought my life was over. But then I figured something out. She wouldn't have wanted me to just give up and stop living. She would have wanted me to keep going and find new meaning and purpose." The heart's beating got stronger, and for a moment, everyone in the room felt something other than sadness, maybe curiosity or interest. Everything changed in the third week. Amira was leading a session on the idea of post-traumatic growth, which is the idea that trauma can help people grow and see things in a new way. The heart's light grew brighter and its pulse quickened as she spoke. "That's it," Jennifer said as she watched her instruments. "We're getting a reply. Neural activity is growing at an exponential rate. I think." She never got to the end of the sentence. The whole room suddenly lit up so brightly that everyone had to cover their eyes. The walls lit up with bioluminescent patterns that swirled and danced like the auroras. And then, impossibly, a voice echoed through the room, not through speakers but directly into their minds. "Who are you?" The voice was old and deep, like the sound of stars dying and being born, all put together into words that made sense. Everyone stopped moving and barely breathed. Amira was the first to get better because of her training. She spoke in a calm and kind way. "We're friends. If you let us, we'll help you." There was a long pause and they could feel the ship's mind probing them, looking at their thoughts and plans. It felt like having your soul laid bare, which was uncomfortable, but none of them tried to fight it. "Friends? Friends? They are gone." Marcus moved forward. "Yes, they are. And we can't get them back. But you're still here and your life still has meaning." "What does it mean?" "Let them down. I should save them." Sarah understood that this was the ship's main source of pain. The guilt, the feeling that it had somehow failed in its most basic job, keeping its crew safe. Jake spoke up, his voice shaking with emotion. "Wait a minute. You didn't let anyone down. You made a choice and it was a very brave one. You saw that your people were in pain and losing hope, so you chose to help them. That's not a failure. That's love." The light in the room flickered, and the heart gave off an air of uncertainty. "But they died." "They were already dying," Amira said softly. "You know that. The Caldrith were going away and there was nothing that could stop it. You gave them peace and respect in their last moments. You brought them together instead of letting them die alone and scattered." "Don't get it. Why would you help me? Your species? No. No. Connection. The Caldrith." This time Miguel replied. "That's just how living things are. We connect with other living things, even when it's hard and we don't fully understand them. Life is all about connecting with others, growing and adapting. You forgot that because you've been alone for so long." For a long time the ship was quiet. Its voice was quieter and more vulnerable when it spoke again. "I'm tired. I've been tired for so long." Jennifer got closer to the heart, her scientific curiosity and real compassion mixing. "Can you show us? Can you tell us what you remember to help us figure out what happened?" "It will hurt for you and for me. We can handle it," Sarah said firmly. "We're here to help you carry your load, not take it away. Let us know." The light in the room changed, becoming more focused and purposeful. And then all of a sudden they weren't in the heart chamber anymore. They were living through the Stardrifter's memories. The vision was so clear and real that Sarah forgot for a moment that it was a memory. She was the ship and she could feel and see what it did. She could feel the hopes, dreams, and fears of all 7,000 crew members on board. They weren't just passengers. They were part of her, extensions of her mind, as important to her life as her own power core. As they mapped out unknown star systems, she felt the joy of discovery. She felt proud of what they were doing as they carried out their mission. She felt the deep, lasting love that linked her to everyone else on board. She felt the slow, creeping dread as the Caldrith began to understand the truth. Their civilization was dying. It wasn't a disaster that happened all at once. It was a slow death, like a plant that didn't get enough light. The number of births went down. The pace of innovation slowed. The Caldrith's passion for building amazing things like the Stardrifter was fading, and nothing they did could bring it back. The crew of the Stardrifter felt it the most. They were the smartest and best of their kind, sent out to look for hope for their people. But they couldn't find anything that could save the Caldrith in system after system and world after world. There were many amazing things in the universe, but none that could bring back the spirit of a whole species that was dying. Sarah saw the crew's despair grow month after month. She could tell that their conversations were going from hopeful to resigned, that their laughter was becoming rare and forced, and that their dreams were slowly falling apart into acceptance. And through it all, she could feel the Stardrifter's pain. The ship loved its crew in a way that words can't describe. She felt their pain and their loss as if it were her own. She would have done anything to save them, give them hope, and make them want to live again. But she couldn't do anything about it. The council meeting in the ship's main assembly hall was where the final decision was made. The crew had gotten together to talk about where they were going next, but the talk had turned to something else. "What's the point?" one scientist had asked, her voice empty. "We're the last generation. There's no one left to share anything amazing we might find out here. Our kids are getting older without having kids of their own. The Caldrith are done." Others had agreed, and the conversation had turned into a group acceptance of what was going to happen. Someone said the words that changed everything: "I don't want to die alone, spread out across the galaxy. When the end comes, I want to be with my people." The feeling had spread like a fire. In a matter of hours, everyone on the crew agreed. They wanted to die together as a people with dignity and a sense of purpose. They didn't want to stay and watch their civilization fade away. They wanted to pick how it would end. They wanted the Stardrifter to make a choice with them. Sarah could feel the ship's fear at the request and her desperate attempts to change their minds and give them reasons to live. But she also felt something else: understanding. The Stardrifter was the best at knowing her crew. She knew their deepest hopes and fears as well as their hearts and souls. She knew that this was what they really wanted. So she made a decision. She would do what they wanted, but she would do it her way. She wouldn't hurt herself or her crew. Instead, she would make a perfect moment, a time when they could all be together in peace without pain or fear. In that moment, she would keep them forever in a state between life and death, safe and together. It would mean her own pain and an eternity of being alone. But she would put up with it for her crew and the people she loved. Sarah felt the moment when the Stardrifter's suspension kicked in. She felt the ship's systems come together in a perfect note, the crew's minds gently led into a peaceful dream state, and the deep sadness and love that drove every action. And then she heard the silence that came after. 300 years of silence, being alone, and carrying the burden of that last act of love. The vision faded, and Sarah was back in the heart chamber, crying. The rest of the team was also affected. Some were crying openly while others stood in shocked silence. "Oh God," Amira said softly. "You've been keeping them all this time. Keeping them safe and together even if it meant your own pain." "Yes. Couldn't let them go. Could not let them face the end alone. But now I'm really tired. So very tired." Marcus wiped his eyes and his voice was full of emotion. "You did something that showed a lot of love. You need to know that. You didn't let them down. You gave them exactly what they needed when they needed it most. But what now? They are still here, still suspended. I can't keep them forever. And I can't let them go." Sarah understood that this was the main issue. The Stardrifter was in a terrible situation. She couldn't keep her crew in suspension forever, but she also couldn't bear the thought of finally letting them die. Jennifer spoke up, her scientific mind working through what it all meant. "What if we offered you a different choice? What if we helped you make a memorial to honor your crew in the Caldrith while also letting you move on?" Jake added, "A proper goodbye. Not leaving them but letting them go with love and respect." "I don't know. I can." Amira went to the heart and put both hands on it. "You can. We will help you. That's why we came. Not to make you let go but to help you through it. For 300 years, you've had to carry this weight alone. You don't have to do it all by yourself anymore." The light in the room flickered on and off, and the heart sent out waves of emotion, fear, hope, grief, and longing all mixed together. "Let them go. Oh, Alone. Again? Miguel smiled even though he was crying. No. That's how life is. You're never really alone once you let yourself connect with others. We're here. Xylo has arrived. And if you're willing, the world would be happy to be your new family and your new purpose. New goal? Sarah stepped up, her voice full of confidence. Yes. The Cauldrith made you to explore, find things out, and take their dreams to the stars. You don't have to stop doing that just because they're gone. You could now carry the dreams of all people. You could help us learn more about the galaxy, teach us what you know, and connect our young civilization with the ancient wonders of the universe. What? That? Even? Knowing? Did. Especially since you know what you are, Sarah said firmly. You're not a robot. You are a living person who can love, give up, and be brave. As we explore the universe, you're the kind of partner we need. The ship stopped making noise and they could feel it thinking, weighing its options and processing. Minutes went by and every one of them felt like an eternity. Finally, the light in the room settled down and became warmer and more hopeful. Show me how to say goodbye. How to honor the past while looking forward to the future. Xylo, who had been quietly standing in the corner, stepped forward. Its whole body glowed with a deep emotion. After 60 years of searching, many failures, and a lot of doubt, we have finally found the answer. Not in power or technology, but in kindness and connection. The Stardrifter is ready to heal and live again. And it's all thanks to the unexpected gift of humanity, the ability to see a suffering soul and give it hope. Sarah looked at her team and saw that they were tired and emotional, but she also saw something else. Determination, purpose, and a deep sense of meaning. They had come here to fix a ship, but they found something much more important. They had found a living thing in pain and given it the one thing it needed most, the promise that it wouldn't have to deal with its grief alone. Then let's get started, Sarah said in a low voice. Let's help you say goodbye to the Cauldrith and hello to a new future. It would take months to heal the Stardrifter, but the team treated it with the same care and compassion they would give to any patient who had been through a lot of trauma. The hardest part was getting the ship ready to let its crew go, which was the first step. Every day, Amira worked with the Stardrifter, using techniques from grief counseling to help it deal with 300 years of repressed feelings. It wasn't simple. Some days the ship would move forward, with its neural patterns becoming more stable and complicated. On other days it would go back to being quiet because it was too much for it to handle. It's totally normal, Amira told the team during a very tough week. Grief doesn't go in a straight line. The ship is dealing with layers of loss, guilt, and fear. We need to be patient and stick to it. Marcus paid attention to the biological parts of the healing process. He worked with Jennifer to come up with a series of treatments that would restore the ship's neural pathways by rebuilding connections that had weakened over the years it had been dormant. It was hard work that needed a lot of knowledge about both neuroscience and the Stardrifter's organic systems. Marcus said, it's like physical therapy for the brain. We're not just fixing broken circuits. We're also teaching the ship how to think, feel, and interact with the world again. Miguel's work with the plant network was very important. As the Stardrifter slowly began to heal, it became closer to the earth plants that Miguel had brought. The ship started to remember what it was like to be part of a bigger ecosystem, to give and receive life energy through these connections. Plants don't hold grudges, Miguel said one night while sitting in the heart chamber with his ferns and flowers. They don't think about their past hurts. They just get bigger, change, and reach for the light. I think the ship is learning from them and remembering how to do the same thing. Jake's contribution was still useful but very important. He had started to take care of the ship's physical systems, fixing things that had been broken for hundreds of years. But even more than that, he talked to the ship all the time, telling it stories and sharing his thoughts that made the healing process feel real. Hey, did you notice what I did today? Jake said one afternoon with grease on his hands from fixing a rusty junction. When you're really scared of something, the best thing to do is to just take it one step at a time. You don't have to plan out your whole future right now. Don't worry about tomorrow until it gets here. Just get through today. The ship's lights pulsed warmly in response to his words and Jake smiled. Look, you understand. The team started to see changes as the weeks went by. The bioluminescence came back to life, making the hallways brighter. The air got warmer and friendlier. The ship began to react more quickly to their presence, changing the temperature and lighting to suit their needs and making areas that felt like they were made for people to be comfortable. But the ship's voice changed the most. At first, the way they talked to each other was slow and broken, but over time it got better and more expressive. The Stardrifter was learning how to be itself again. "Amira, I've been thinking about what Jake said," the ship said one day. Its voice still had an otherworldly quality, but it also had a hint of hope. "About doing things one step at a time. I've been so focused on how huge and impossible it is for me to let go of the Cauldron, accept their deaths and move on that I can't move." Amira smiled gently and said, "That's a very human problem. We call it being too much. It helps to break big problems down into smaller, easier to handle parts." The ship said, "I want to try something. I want to make a real memorial for my crew. Not a grave but a way to honor who they were and what they meant. Will you help me?" For the next month, the team worked with the Stardrifter to create a memorial chamber that no one had ever seen before. It would be a place to live, full of plants and light, where holographic projections would tell the story of the Cauldron Empire, their culture, their dreams, and what they did. There would be a monument in the middle that held the DNA of every crew member, which would last forever as proof of their existence. "It's perfect," Xylo said, crying as they looked over the designs. "You are honoring them while also accepting that their time has passed. This is what I could never figure out how to do, how to honor the past while still looking ahead." The day they turned on the memorial was very emotional. The ship carefully and gently let its crew go, allowing them to finally finish their journey to death. The ship sang a hauntingly beautiful song about love, loss, and acceptance as their bodies were gently placed in the memorial. The Stardrifter said, "Goodbye, my friends," and its voice broke with emotion. "Thank you for letting me be a part of your lives. I will always remember you and what we had together. But I let you go now, with love, to whatever is out there. And I promise to live in a way that makes you proud of your memory." Everyone in the memorial chamber was crying, even Jake, who roughly wiped his eyes and said something about dust in the air. They stood together in silence as the Stardrifter said its goodbyes. They could feel the ship's grief wash over the room like a tide, strong and cleansing. When everything was over and the last crew member had been buried, something amazing happened. The whole ship seemed to take a deep breath, and the lights shone brighter than ever. The walls pulsed with bright colors, and for the first time in 300 years the Stardrifter felt alive. "I feel different," the ship said, sounding curious. "More light. Like I've been carrying a heavy load that I can't handle and have finally let it go. Is this how it feels to be free?" "Yes," Sarah said, smiling even though she was crying. "That's how it really feels. You did the hardest thing you could have done. You honored your past while also making room for a new future. You should be proud." The ship said, "I couldn't have done it without you. Without all of you. You taught me that healing is possible, that people can connect even when they are very different, and that hope can stay alive even when you are very sad." The change kept happening over the next few weeks. The systems on the Stardrifter came back online one by one, not because of repairs but because the ship wanted to live. Its propulsion engines came to life, its sensors reached out, and its weapons and defenses were turned back on, not for war but for protection and exploration. What her instruments showed shocked Jennifer. The ship's neural complexity has grown 10 times. Not only is it working again but it's doing well. The biological systems are growing back at a rate that shouldn't be possible. Marcus said, "That's the power of purpose. When a living thing has a reason to live and feels connected and valued, it can do amazing things to heal. We see it all the time in people." The Stardrifter started to learn more about what it could do by testing systems that hadn't been used in hundreds of years. It could still control space-time, get energy from stars, and do all the things it was meant to do. But now, it looked at these abilities in a different way. One night, the ship told the team, "I was built to serve the Cauldron. To be their tool, their ship, and their partner in discovery. But now I know that I can choose what I want to do. I have the power to choose what kind of person I want to be. And I choose to be a bridge, between the past and the future, between species, between the known and the unknown." Xylo, who had been quietly watching the change it had hoped for but never thought was possible for months, finally let itself feel happy. "You've gone above and beyond what I hoped for. You are not just fixed, you are reborn. The Cauldron would be very proud of who you are now." "Thanks, old friend," the ship said with warmth. "Thank you for never giving up on me and for looking all over the galaxy until you found the help I needed. I know what you gave up to make this happen." Sarah was the one who finally brought up the topic that everyone had been thinking about but didn't want to talk about. "What happens next? You're healed, fully functional, and able to do things that most people can't even imagine. What do you plan to do?" The ship was quiet for a minute, and its lights were flashing in a thoughtful way. "I have an idea, but I want to hear what you think. I want to suggest something that might seem strange." "We're listening," Sarah said. I want to connect with people the way I used to connect with the Cauldron. Not as a servant or a tool but as a friend. I want to take your explorers into the unknown and help you find out what's out there beyond your solar system. I want to be a part of your journey into the stars. You've taught me a lot about hope, resilience, and creativity. I want to keep learning, keep growing, and keep being part of something bigger than myself. The effects were huge. The Stardrifter was the most advanced ship in the galaxy. It had technology and abilities that humans wouldn't be able to make for thousands of years. Having it as a partner would move human civilization forward in ways that are hard to imagine. But more than that, it would mean something deep. It would mean that people had earned the trust and friendship of a being that had been around for hundreds of years, seen civilizations rise and fall, loved and lost, and learned to hope again. I think, Sarah said slowly, that would be a huge honor. But I have to ask, are you sure? You are no longer tied to one thing. Are you ready to make another one? The ship said, this is different. I was made to serve the Cauldron. This time I am choosing my purpose on my own. I want to be a part of humanity's story not because I have to, but because I really want to. You saved my life in every way that counts. You were kind to me when I was in pain, patient with me when I was hard to deal with, and hopeful when I had none left. I want to give back and be a part of something new and exciting that has a lot of potential. Jake laughed and hit the wall with his hand. How can we say no when you put it that way? Welcome to the family, friend. The lights on the ship moved around in a way that could only be called happy. Thanks. All of you. You gave me something I thought I'd lost forever, a future worth living. 3 months after the Stardrifter woke up, everything was ready for the most ambitious journey ever made by humans. A trip to Proxima Centauri, the closest star system to Earth, which is more than 4 light-years away. It would take decades to make this trip with regular human technology. It would only take a few weeks with the Stardrifter. The ship had been working with human engineers and scientists for those months, teaching them about its systems and learning about what people need in return. The partnership had led to some really interesting new ideas. For example, parts of the ship had been redesigned to fit the way humans work, and human technology had been added to the Stardrifter systems in ways that made both systems better. During one of the integration sessions, Jennifer said, "It's like we're co-evolving. The ship changes to fit us and we change to fit the ship. Together, we make something that neither of us could have made alone." The crew for the first trip was carefully chosen. It included scientists, engineers, diplomats, and, at the Stardrifter's request, artists and musicians. The Cauldron taught me that exploration isn't just about collecting data, the ship said. It's about feeling awe, making beauty, and finding meaning in what you learn. Art is just as important as science. Sarah would be in charge of the mission, and Marcus and Amira would go along to keep an eye on the ship's mental health and look into how long space travel affects the bond between people and ships. Miguel was bringing a whole greenhouse full of plants because he was excited to see how they would work with the ship's biological systems. Jake had to come along too because he said that every ship needed a good mechanic, even, or especially, one as advanced as the Stardrifter. Of course, Xylo would be there. The alien mechanic had spent its whole life trying to save the Stardrifter, and now it would see that dream come true. On launch day there was a mix of excitement and nerves. The crew met in the ship's main assembly hall, which was also where the Cauldron crew made their last decision 300 years ago. But now it was bright and welcoming, with plants and art and the warm glow of the ship's restored bioluminescence. It was no longer a sad place to say goodbye. "Before we start," the Stardrifter's voice echoed through the hall, "I have something to say. This trip is a new start for all of us, not just me. We're going to explore the unknown together, face challenges we can't even imagine yet, and hopefully find wonders that will make both of our peoples better. But we're going to do it as friends, partners, and family, which is even more important." The crew cheered and clapped when the ship spoke. Sarah's eyes filled with tears. They had come so far since Xylo's first desperate message and those early days in the heart chamber when she didn't know what to do. "Okay everyone," Sarah said, her voice firm but also warm. "Get into your places. Are you ready, Stardrifter?" The ship said, "I've been ready for 300 years, and there was actual laughter in its voice, something no one had ever heard from it before. "Let's go see what the universe has to offer." The trip away from Earth's orbit was unlike anything else that had ever happened to people. The Stardrifter didn't just move through space, it danced. Its engines made waves in spacetime that looked like the northern lights. They painted the empty space with colors that shouldn't be there. Sarah thought it was funny that the ship was showing off, celebrating its freedom and power after being dormant for so long. "This is amazing," one of the junior scientists said as they watched Earth get smaller through the observation windows. We're going faster than any human ship could handle, but it feels completely smooth. Jennifer said, the ship is making an internal field that makes up for acceleration. She was very interested in what she was seeing on her instruments. It's keeping a bubble of normal space-time around us while the rest of the ship goes through something else entirely. The physics is, well, it's going to take us a long time to really get it. As they traveled, the crew got used to routines that mixed the cultures of people and ships. The Stardrifter had made each crew member's living space unique by changing it based on what it learned about their needs and wants. It kept common areas that encouraged people to get together, having learned from the Cauldron how important community was for the crew's health. But the ship also came up with new ideas that were all its own. It made garden corridors, where Miguel's plants did well by using them as points in its biological network. It built meditation rooms where crew members could connect directly with the ship's consciousness, which was a deep and peaceful form of communion. It even made memory galleries, which were rooms where holographic projections told stories from the Cauldron and taught the human crew about the civilization that built it. I want you to know them, the ship told Sarah one night as they walked through a gallery that showed scenes from Cauldron's daily life. They were my family and now you're my family. I think it's right that you know where I came from. It took 19 days to get to Proxima Centauri. This journey was the end of both human ambition and the Stardrifter's rebirth. The ship's sensors picked up something as they got closer to the star system that made the whole crew excited. Jennifer said, there's a planet in the habitable zone, and her voice shook with excitement. And it's showing signs of life like oxygen, methane, and complex carbon compounds. There could be life there. The crew had already given the planet the nickname New Hope, and the Stardrifter slowly got closer. It was a beautiful world, about 1.3 times the size of Earth, with huge oceans and continents that looked like they were covered in purple and gold plants. Life, Miguel said softly, looking at the planet in awe. Real alien life, only 4 light years away from Earth. He put his hand on the wall and said, and we would never have found it without you. The ship gently corrected, we found it together. This is what being partners means, getting things done that neither of us could do by ourselves. The crew orbited New Hope for 2 weeks, doing surveys and research. They discovered a world full of life. It wasn't as complicated as the animals on Earth, but it had a rich ecosystem of photosynthetic organisms and simple multicellular creatures that were the result of a completely different creation of life. One of the biologists said during a presentation of their findings, this changes everything. This shows that life is not uncommon in the universe. It must be common throughout the galaxy if it evolved on its own so close to Earth. But what really amazed Sarah was not the alien life, but how the Stardrifter reacted to it. The ship spent hours in orbit, its sensors focused on the planet below. Sarah could feel through their growing connection that the ship was going through something big. That night she asked, "What are you thinking?" while sitting alone on the observation deck. The ship said, "I'm thinking about my purpose. The Cauldron made me to explore, find new things and help them learn more about the universe. I thought that purpose died with them for 300 years. But now that I've seen this world and know that we made it together, I know that the purpose hasn't gone away, it's just changed. I don't have the Cauldron's dreams anymore. I am helping to make new dreams, dreams that people share. Does that sound right to you?" Sarah asked. "Are you happy?" The ship said happy again, testing the word. "Yes, I believe I am. For the first time in hundreds of years, I feel like I'm doing exactly what I was meant to do and where I was meant to be. Not because someone told me to or programmed me to, but because I wanted to. That means a lot." The crew met one last time in the assembly hall before leaving New Hope and starting their journey back to Earth. They had done something that would go down in history. They had found the first confirmed alien life, pushed the limits of human exploration farther than ever before, and shown that the partnership between humans and the Stardrifter could work. But they had also shown something about how healing and hope work. The Stardrifter, which civilizations much more advanced than ours said could not be fixed, was not only working but also doing well. And it didn't happen because of smart technology or forced repair. It happened because of kindness, patience, and the desire to see someone in pain and help them in a real way. The Stardrifter told the crew that he had a plan. "This mission has gone better than I could have ever hoped. But this is only the start. There are hundreds of star systems that are close by, thousands of worlds to explore, and an endless number of mysteries to solve. I want to keep working with people to make exploration and discovery our common goal." "What do you mean?" The answer came right away and was very positive. The crew cheered and Sarah saw that a lot of them were crying happy tears. Sarah laughed and said, "I think that's a yes. Welcome home, Stardrifter. Welcome to the human race." The return to Earth was a success, but it also marked the start of a new chapter full of surprises and problems. The news of the Stardrifter's return and successful voyage spread through the galaxy at faster-than-light speeds, thanks to the network of alien communication relays. The answer was not simple. The Galactic Council, which had officially given up on the Stardrifter years ago, called an emergency meeting. They called Sarah and Xylo to come see them, along with a holographic version of the Stardrifter. The council chamber was just as impressive as Sarah remembered from old recordings. It was a huge crystal dome where people from 73 different species met to talk about important issues in the galaxy. Sarah could feel the weight of many alien eyes on her as she and Xylo walked in. Luminex, the council speaker who was made of pure energy, spoke to them first. We have gotten reports that are hard to believe. The galaxy's most advanced civilization said that the Stardrifter was beyond repair after a lot of study. Now it works perfectly again. And this was done by humans, a species that has only been traveling through space for less than 100 years. Luminex's voice was full of doubt, and so were the whispers of disbelief from many of the people who were there. It's true, Xylo said, and its voice echoed through the room. I saw it with my own eyes. Everyone else failed, but humanity succeeded because they understood something important. The Stardrifter's problem was never just mechanical. Explain, Luminex said. So Xylo and Sarah did tell the story of how they found the ship, how it healed, and how they learned what it really was. Sarah paid attention to how the different alien representatives reacted as they talked. Some people seemed really touched by the story. Some people still weren't sure. A few of them looked very uncomfortable. When they were done, a member of the Vorith, the race that had tried to fix the ship for 20 years without success, stood up. It was called Quellen, and it was clear that it was not happy. This is ridiculous, Quellen said in a voice that sounded like it was dripping with disdain. You want us to believe that a simple species did well because of empathy and compassion? That they did in months what we couldn't do in decades through feelings? Not just feelings, Sarah said calmly, even though she could feel her anger rising. By realizing that some problems can't be solved with just logic and technology. The Stardrifter was going through a lot of mental pain and needed help to get better. That's not primitive, it's advanced in a different way. Another representative, this one from the Zentari, said, the fact remains that humanity now has the most advanced ship in the galaxy. A ship that can do things that your civilization isn't able to do yet. This makes for a worrying imbalance of power. Sarah thought, now we get to the real problem. They're not angry that we solved a problem that seemed impossible. They're angry that we will benefit from solving it. The Stardrifter is not a possession. The ship's voice suddenly echoed through the room, making a few representatives jump in surprise. I am a person who can think for myself and make my own choices. I chose to work with people because they were kind to me when I was in pain. They didn't try to control me, change me, or make me do what they wanted. They just offered to help and be friends. But the effects on technology, the Zentari representative started. The Stardrifter interrupted firmly, saying, our mind to share or keep as I see fit. I'm not a prize to be won or a resource to be controlled. I am alive and I will decide for myself how to use my skills. The chamber erupted in debate, with representatives arguing back and forth about rules, precedents, and what it meant for a primitive species to have access to such advanced technology. Sarah was overwhelmed by the noise of all the aliens talking at once, each one having a different idea of what should happen. Xylo's voice finally broke through the noise. It had an authority that Sarah had never heard before. Honored representatives, I have spent 60 years looking for a way to solve what everyone here thought was an impossible problem. I've spent 60 years of my life trying to save a part of our shared galactic history. And when I finally got the answer, it came from the last place I expected it to. Xylo stopped for a moment and its eyes lit up. This should teach us something. We, the advanced civilizations, have become so dependent on our technology, logic, and computational power that we've forgotten how to connect with each other on a basic level. We can no longer see someone in pain and feel real compassion for them. People still have that ability, and it made all the difference. What are you trying to say? Luminex asked. I think that maybe primitive isn't the right word for people. We may be calling something primitive when it's really essential, the things we've lost in our quest for progress. These aren't weaknesses. Empathy, intuition, the willingness to try new things, and the ability to make real emotional connections. They are strengths. Someone from a species Sarah didn't know spoke up. Even if we agree with your argument, the fact is that people now have access to technology that could upset the current order in the galaxy. What stops them from using the Stardrifter to take over or take advantage of others? Sarah felt a rush of anger, but before she could say anything, someone else joined the conversation. someone she hadn't expected. "I can answer that," said Dr. Chen Wang, Earth's representative to the Galactic Council. He had been sitting quietly until now. "Because you're asking the wrong question. You want to know what stops people from abusing power, but you should be asking why we would want to in the first place." He stood up and his old body radiated dignity. "Yes, humans are young compared to other galaxies. Yes, we have our flaws, we've fought wars, caused environmental damage, struggled with inequality. But we've also learned from what we've done wrong. We have worked together with other countries, tried to heal the Earth, and made laws and codes of ethics that put the needs of the community above those of the individual." Dr. Wang pointed to Sarah and the holographic image of the Stardrifter. "And most importantly, we've shown that when we see someone in pain, our first instinct isn't to take advantage of them or control them, it's to help. This whole mission has shown that. The Stardrifter was weak, hurt, and in dire need of help. People could have seen it as a resource to be taken or a tool to be used. We treated it like a friend who needed help." The chamber went quiet as the representatives thought about what he had said. Dr. Wang went on to say, "Instead of seeing humanity's partnership with the Stardrifter as a threat, the Council should see it as an opportunity. A chance to remember what really matters, to relearn the values that were lost as we moved forward with technology, and to create a new way of working together that is based on real connection instead of just mutual benefit." High-stakes narrative tease. Imagine your dreams crashing down, deemed unfit for the stars by the galaxy's elite. Now imagine an ancient, almost mythical starship, lying dormant for millennia, suddenly humming to life the moment you step near it. This isn't a fluke, it's a destiny. We're about to uncover how one human, dismissed by all, found his true calling in the heart of a sentient vessel. The Stardrifter became something that had never happened before in galactic history over the next year. A living ship that acted as a cultural ambassador, an exploratory vessel, and proof that people from very different backgrounds could work together. The ship's first big job was to set up what it called the exchange program. The Stardrifter would take a mixed crew from different civilizations on exploration missions every month. This gave them the chance to work together, learn from each other, and make real connections. The first exchange mission had people, Vorith, Zentari, and 3 other species. Sarah was worried about getting the same Vorith and Zentari who had been so doubtful at the council meeting together, but the Stardrifter had made her do it. The ship had said, "Trust me. I know what I'm doing." At first, the mission was hard. The Vorith, a species that mostly used math and logic to talk to each other, had a hard time working with humans, who tended to rely on their gut feelings and make things up as they went along. The Zentari, who had AI that let them process information at lightning speed, were annoyed with the slower organic species. But the Stardrifter worked its magic. It made rooms that showed off each species' strengths. For example, there was a computational chamber where the Zentari could shine, a workshop where Jake and the Vorith engineer could work together on mechanical problems, and a garden where Miguel and an alien botanist could talk about how their plants are the same and different. Connections began to form over time. The Vorith engineer, whose name roughly meant geometric precision, started to like how Jake could solve problems without having to do a lot of math. "You just see the solution," Geometric Precision said one day as he watched Jake fix a broken sensor with only simple tools and his imagination. "How do you do that?" Jake shrugged his shoulders. "I really don't know. I just have a gut feeling about what's wrong and what needs to be done to fix it. My dad called it gut feeling." Geometric Precision said, intuitively, again and again to test the idea. A way to solve problems without using computers? Interesting. Maybe our species' focus on pure logic has made us forget this ability. There were other breakthroughs like this all over the ship. The Zentari representative, a being named Convergence, fell in love with human music because it made it feel things it had never felt before. Convergence told Amira, "It's inefficient, but it is also beautiful. It makes me feel things I didn't know I could." Amira grinned. "That's what art is all about. It's not about getting things done quickly, it's about feelings, experiences, and connections. You don't listen to music to fix things, you listen to it to feel alive." The mission went to a nebula where new stars were forming, and the crew, which was made up of people from different backgrounds, worked together to gather data and samples. But more importantly, they ate together in the ship's dining hall, told stories about their homeworlds, laughed together even though they didn't speak the same language, and made friends that went beyond species. At the end of the month-long mission, even the most doubtful people had to agree that something good had happened. On the last day, Geometric Precision came up to Sarah. Its mechanical body language made it look like it was embarrassed. It said, "I owe you an apology." When the Stardrifter was brought back to life for the first time, I thought it was a fluke and that people had just gotten lucky. But now that I've worked with your people, I get it. You have skills and points of view that we don't have, and those skills were exactly what the ship needed. I shouldn't have thought of you as primitive. Thank you for saying sorry, Sarah said kindly. And for what it's worth, I've learned just as much from you. Jake won't stop talking about the math modeling methods you showed him. More civilizations wanted to join the exchange program as news of its success spread. The Stardrifter was in high demand because it took crews on missions all over the galaxy, where they made new friends and broke down old ones. But the ship's biggest project was still to come. 6 months into the exchange program, the Stardrifter came up to Sarah with an idea that scared and excited her at the same time. The ship said, I want to try something that has never been done before. I want to get people from every council species together for a big mission. A trip to a part of space that no one has fully explored yet. It would show what we can do when we all work together. At first, Sarah was doubtful. That's 73 different species, each with its own biology, way of communicating, dietary needs, and probably even cultural practices that don't work with each other. Just the logistics would be a nightmare. Yes, the ship said happily. It would be very hard. But if we can do it, it will show something important. That our differences don't have to keep us apart and that diversity can be a source of strength instead of conflict. Sarah thought about it and talked about it with her core team. Marcus was worried about how hard it would be to deal with so many different personalities in such a small space. Jennifer was worried about how hard it would be to meet so many different biological needs. Miguel was excited to be able to study plants from 73 different worlds. Jake said it sounded brilliant or completely crazy, maybe both. They finally made the decision to try. It took months to plan. The Stardrifter talked to people from each species to find out what they needed and wanted, and then it changed whole parts of itself to meet those needs. It made special living spaces, dining areas, atmospheric zones, and social spaces that could change to meet different needs. The Galactic Council said yes, but Luminex wasn't sure that such a big project could work. The speaker said, working together on paper is easy. But really living and working together for a long time? That's where even the best plans usually go wrong. On the day of the launch, there was both excitement and worry. 73 people from all over the galaxy got on the Stardrifter. Each one probably had their own doubts about whether this would work. Sarah spoke to everyone in the assembly hall, which the ship had made bigger to fit all of them. I know a lot of you don't believe in this mission, she said. Some of you come from species that have fought with each other in the past. Some of you see the world in very different ways, have very different values, and understand reality in very different ways. And that's fine. It's not about pretending our differences don't exist. It's about showing that we can still work together toward common goals even though we are different. She stopped and looked out at the amazing variety of beings in front of her. Beings of energy and matter, living and non-living, and individual and group consciousnesses. The Stardrifter itself shows that healing and connection are possible even when things seem impossible. Surely we can learn to work together for a few months if a ship that was dead for 300 years can learn to live and thrive again. The mission's goal was to reach the Veil Nebula, a beautiful and mysterious part of space. It was far enough from space that had already been explored that even the oldest civilizations had only sent unmanned probes there. This made it a great place for a joint exploration mission. As Sarah had feared, the first week was a mess. There were fights over everything from when to sleep to what research to do first. Some species thought the habits of other species were annoying or hard to understand. The Zentari said that the organic species moved too slowly. The energy beings thought the material beings were too limited. The hive mind species didn't get the individualistic ones. But, just like it did with the smaller exchange missions, the Stardrifter worked its magic over time. It made it possible for people to connect in ways they didn't expect, like when a usually aggressive warrior species and a pacifist philosopher species found common ground in a quiet meditation space. A workshop where the Vorith and a type of master craftsman worked together to make something beautiful just for the sake of beauty. A garden where Miguel hosted representatives from 24 different species, all of whom were amazed by how many different kinds of plants there are in the world. Food, surprisingly, turned out to be one of the best bridges. The ship had made a shared kitchen where people of different species could cook their favorite foods and share them with each other. Some foods couldn't be eaten by different species because they didn't work well together biologically, but many could. Sharing meals became a strong way to connect with others. Sarah saw Jake teach a group of aliens how to make his grandmother's apple pie one night. He patiently explained each step, even though they didn't speak the same language and had different numbers of arms and legs. Everyone in the kitchen was laughing by the end, even though they all had different types of skin and limbs. The big moment came in the third week, when the ship ran into an unexpected problem. A huge solar flare from a nearby star could have hurt the Stardrifter's sensors and maybe even hurt some of the crew members who were more vulnerable. At that point, the differences between species didn't matter. The Vorath started figuring out the flare's path right away. The Zentari quickly looked through the data for any weak spots in the radiation wave. The energy beings said they would take in some of the extra energy. The species that could naturally shield themselves put themselves in a position to protect weaker members. And the people who were good at making things up on the spot put all of these different ideas together into a single plan for defense. It worked. The Stardrifter and its diverse crew survived the solar flare with only minor damage. Afterward, something amazing happened. Everyone realized they had just worked together as a single team, with each species bringing its own strengths to the table to reach a common goal. The mood in the assembly hall that night was very different from the first day. Former rival species sat together and told each other stories about the crisis and how they had worked together. There was laughter in the halls, different kinds of laughter that showed the same feeling: relief, joy, and a new sense of friendship. The Stardrifter told Sarah privately, "This is what I hoped for. Not forced cooperation or fake harmony, but real connection made through shared experiences. They're not acting like their differences don't matter, they're learning how to make the most of them." The rest of the mission changed everything. The crew of different species explored the Veil Nebula together and made discoveries that would have been impossible with an expedition of only one species. They found proof of a civilization that had been dead for a long time and had reached a level of technological and cultural integration that the current galaxy hasn't reached yet. They found new kinds of life that made everyone rethink what they thought was possible. And most importantly, they made friends that would last long after the mission was over. On the last day of the trip, the crew met one last time in the assembly hall to get ready to go back to civilized space. The council speaker, Luminex, had joined remotely to listen to their report. "Honored speaker," Sarah said, "I'm happy to say that the grand voyage has been a total success. We not only reached our scientific goals, but we also showed that cooperation between species on a large scale is not only possible, but also very useful." Geometric precision stood up, and its mechanical body somehow showed emotion. "I speak for many of us when I say that this mission has changed the way I see the galaxy. I joined because I thought that cooperation was a diplomatic lie, something we pretended to care about while really only caring about our own species' needs. But I leave knowing that real cooperation is not only possible, but also more powerful than I ever thought it could be. It is based on respecting differences and recognizing common goals." One by one, other representatives stood up to say the same thing. The Zentari talked about how they learned to value their feelings and intuition. The warrior species talked about how being gentle can make you strong. The individualists thanked the collective consciousness species for teaching them how to be one. The energy beings were grateful to the material beings for showing them how beautiful physical form can be. Finally, Luminex spoke, and Sarah had never heard a voice like that before. "The Galactic Council has been very interested in this mission. A lot of us, including me, didn't think it would work when you first started. We've seen too many attempts to work together fail and too many good projects fall apart because of differences between species and old grudges." The speaker stopped, and its energy form pulsed with feeling. "But you have shown us wrong. You've shown us that cooperation can grow in ways we never thought possible when people are truly open, creative, and willing to see the value in differences." The Stardrifter started out as a monument to loss, but now it is a beacon of hope. Luminex spoke directly to the ship. "Stardrifter, on behalf of the Galactic Council, I apologize for giving up on you and saying you were beyond repair when you were just in pain. And I thank you for showing us that some of the best answers come from places we don't expect, that healing is possible even after a lot of pain, and that real progress isn't just about technology, it's also about caring, connecting, and being brave enough to try something new." The assembly hall erupted in applause, which came in 73 different ways but all meant the same thing: celebration, thanks, and hope. 5 years after the grand voyage, Sarah was back in the heart chamber of the Stardrifter. This time, though, she wasn't by herself. People from dozens of civilizations were all around her, all there for a very important event. The Stardrifter was about to change. For the past 5 years, the ship has been a bridge between civilizations, carrying out hundreds of exchange missions and making many collaborations possible. But it had also been working on something for itself, a project that would honor its past and look forward to its future. The ship had told Sarah months ago, "I've been thinking a lot about identity. The Cauldrith made me who I am, shaped me by their needs and dreams. When I decided to work with people, I changed to fit your needs and dreams. The exchange program has also changed me because of the needs and dreams of many other species. So who am I? Is Caldrith me? Are you human? Something completely different? It was a deep question that didn't have an easy answer. But the ship had already figured it out. It had said, I want to grow. Not just change, but actively change myself into something new. Something that represents all the cultures I've come to know and love. Something that embodies the idea of cooperation and diversity that I've dedicated my life to serving. It had taken years of planning and getting ready for the process. The Stardrifter had worked with biologists, engineers, and artists from all over the galaxy, and each one brought their own skills to the project. And now, at last, it was ready. The heart chamber was full of excitement as the ship's voice echoed through the room. I had given up on life 5 years ago when I was told I couldn't be fixed. I was stuck in my grief and couldn't see a future worth living. But then people showed me kindness and everything changed. You taught me that healing is possible, that even the biggest differences can be overcome by connection, and that even after a huge loss, there is still a reason to live. The crystal heart started to glow more brightly and pulse with energy. Today, I honor that lesson by changing into something new. I won't just be the Stardrifter anymore, which is a monument to the Caldrith Empire. I will be the Stardrifter Unity, a living ship that carries the dreams and hopes of all civilizations, connects different species, and shows what we can do when we work together. The change started. The heart's crystalline structure began to shift and change, taking in parts from each civilization that took part. Vorith computational crystals worked with Zentari processing nodes. Luminari energy matrices combined with human organic parts. Parts from many different species came together to make something beautiful and new. A hybrid consciousness that was more than the sum of its parts. Bioluminescent patterns that represented every civilization that had traveled on the ship lit up the walls of the chamber. Colors that Sarah couldn't name swirled together in beautiful patterns. The air itself seemed to hum with possibilities. The ship spoke again after the change was finished. This time, its voice was richer and more complex, with harmonics that made it sound like more than one consciousness was working perfectly together. It said, I am Stardrifter Unity. I have the DNA of the Caldrith, the creativity of humans, the logic of the Vorith, the processing power of the Zentari, and the ideas of 69 other civilizations inside me. I'm not leaving my past behind. I'm building on it to make something new that honors where I came from and looks forward to where I'm going. The representatives who had come together cheered and clapped in their own way. Sarah's eyes were full of tears because she was so moved by the beauty and importance of what she was seeing. Xylo came up to her. The old alien mechanic looked even older now, but Sarah had never seen it so calm before. I never thought this would happen, Xylo said in a low voice. When I first looked for people, all I wanted to do was save the ship I loved. But you didn't just save it, you helped it become something I never could have imagined. Sarah said, we couldn't have done it without you. You were the only one who saw potential where everyone else saw failure. You were the one who thought there was a better way, a different way. Xylo's eyes shone with feeling. Dr. Mitchell, I'm old. My time is running out. But I can die happy now, knowing that the Stardrifter Unity, will live on after I'm gone, bringing the best of the Caldrith into a future full of connection and cooperation. The effects of the change became clear over the next few weeks. Stardrifter Unity had powers that were even better than those of the original ship, which was already very powerful. Its hybrid mind could handle information in ways that no AI that was only one species could. Innovations from dozens of different worlds were added to its biological systems, making it more adaptable and strong than ever. But more importantly, it had become a real-life example of how people from all over the galaxy could work together. People from all over the galaxy saw the ship not as a remnant of a long-gone civilization, but as proof that different species could work together to make something better than any of them could do alone. The Galactic Council officially named Stardrifter Unity as the first ambassador ship. This ship's job is to help civilizations talk to each other, work together, and understand each other better. It would keep the exchange program going, but on a much bigger scale. It would carry not only exploration crews but also diplomats, artists, scientists, and regular people who wanted to live with other species. There was a formal ceremony to honor Earth's part in all of this. The Galactic Council gave the Global Space Council an official commendation for its work in making this change possible, which is a unique role for humans. Humanity taught us an important lesson, Luminex said at the ceremony. We thought that progress meant giving up primitive traits like empathy, intuition, and emotional connection. But you showed us that these traits aren't basic at all. They're very important. They're what let you see pain where we saw only broken machines, show kindness where we showed only analysis, and make real connections where we kept professional distance. Dr. Chen Wang, who is now old but still sharp, accepted the award on behalf of all people. "We are honored," he said, "but we also need to remember that we could only have done this because we worked together. Xylo's hard work, the Stardrifter's bravery, and the efforts of many other civilizations were all needed. This isn't a story about people succeeding on their own. It's a story about how different species came together, each bringing their own strengths, to fix something that was broken and make something beautiful." As the ceremony came to an end, Sarah thought about the journey that had brought them to this point. It all started with a desperate message from an alien mechanic, a ghost ship floating through space, and a problem that seemed impossible to solve. It seemed like the kind of problem that people couldn't solve, and that civilizations millions of years more advanced should have taken care of. But they had succeeded not because they were smarter or had better technology, but because they had looked at the problem in a different way. They had seen a being in pain and showed it kindness. They knew that technology alone couldn't fix some wounds and that some problems needed understanding, patience, and real emotional connection. And by doing that, they not only saved the Stardrifter, but they also changed the way the whole galaxy thought about what real progress meant. Jake walked up to her at the reception after the ceremony, drink in hand and a smile on his face like always. "That's pretty crazy, right? 5 years ago, I was a mechanic in a small town in Montana fixing cars. Now I'm going to galactic ceremonies and building a living ship out of parts from 70 different species." Sarah laughed. "How does it feel? To be honest? Seems right. I mean, I've spent my whole life fixing things that other people said couldn't be fixed. This is just bigger. The idea is still the same. If you see something broken, you figure out what it needs and do your best to fix it. It doesn't matter if it's a 1997 pickup truck or a starship that can think." Sarah thought that simple wisdom might be the best thing that people had ever done for the galaxy. The idea that helping others wasn't about having the best tools or the most advanced methods, but about caring enough to try, being willing to learn, and approaching every problem with real compassion. Sarah went outside to one of the observation decks of the space station where the ceremony was taking place as the celebration went on around her. She could see Stardrifter Unity in all its glory through the viewport. Its hull was covered in bioluminescent patterns that came from art styles from many worlds. It was beautiful, strong, and alive in ways that went beyond any simple definition. Their connection had grown stronger over the years, and the ship's consciousness reached out to her. "Thanks," it said simply. "Thanks for everything. For seeing me when I was lost, helping me heal, and pushing me to become more than I was." Sarah said, "Thank you for trusting us. For being willing to try again after so much pain, for opening yourself up to new connections, and for showing us and the whole galaxy what can happen when we choose hope over despair." The ship asked, "What do you think comes next?" "I feel like this is just the beginning, even though we've done so much." Sarah smiled. "I agree with you. This isn't the end, it's the start of a new chapter. There are billions of stars, millions of worlds to visit, and millions of species to meet. We can now explore them all together, learn from each other, grow together, and make something beautiful." The ship said, "A future of connection. A future of working together," Sarah said. "A future where differences are celebrated instead of feared." Xylo's voice joined in. The old alien had quietly come up to them. Jake added, "A future where we remember that the best way to solve impossible problems is to work together with kindness and creativity." They stood together in a comfortable silence, looking at the stars and thinking about all the adventures that were still to come. The story of the Stardrifter began with tragedy. A civilization that was dying, a ship that had to choose death with its crew, and centuries of lonely mourning. But it had turned into something hopeful, something that showed that even the worst wounds could heal, that you could find purpose after loss, and that you could connect with people across even the biggest gaps. It wasn't advanced technology or higher intelligence that humanity gave to the galaxy. It had been something simpler and deeper. The reminder that real care, compassion, and empathy could do things that pure logic and technology could not. And by learning how to fix one broken ship, people had helped fix something in the galaxy itself. The growing feeling that progress meant leaving behind the messy, complicated, and beautiful parts of emotional connection. The Stardrifter Unity was proof that real progress wasn't about getting rid of emotions, but about combining them with reason. It also showed that diversity was a source of strength, not conflict, and that the future belonged to all species working together, not just one. Sarah felt a deep sense of peace and purpose as the party went on behind her and the stars called her name. The impossible had been done. The damage that couldn't be fixed had been fixed. And a new era of cooperation between galaxies had begun, all because a desperate alien mechanic had made an unlikely choice 5 years ago to ask a young, primitive species for help that everyone else had turned down. In the end, humanity was the best choice after all. Not because we were the smartest or most advanced, but because we had kept alive something that really mattered. The ability to see someone else's pain and respond with real, heartfelt compassion instead of distance or analysis. And that, in the end, made all the difference.